Hello and welcome to the Dailies. International media widely covered Israel's interception of the Global Sumud Flotilla, highlighting the dramatic naval raid, the detention of activists and growing diplomatic fallout. In the US, however, coverage remains dominated by the government shutdown, with federal closures and political deadlock keeping the story at the top of headlines. So most international media covered the Israeli interception of the Global Sumud Flotilla carrying food and aid to Gaza. More than 13 boats of the 40 vessels comprising the flotilla carrying about 500 activists were intercepted by Israeli Navy, who detained over 200 activists who were on board. The Israeli naval forces boarded the vessels and took control of the intercepted ships and transferred detained activists into Israeli custody and ports. Other flotilla vessels are said to have continued attempting to sail towards Gaza. Palestinian and Arab media covered the story extensively, while Al-Quds, which is a Palestinian newspaper, also published a profile honoring Greta Thunberg's solidarity with Gaza. The piece describes the Swedish activist as being best known for her climate movement, and that she was arrested twice by Israeli forces while attempting to break the Gaza blockade with the Global Sumud Flotilla. Thunberg's first arrest came in June 2025 when her ship Madeleine was intercepted, followed by a second detention yesterday, October 1st, aboard the Alma. The piece highlights the international criticism Israel's actions provoked, with human rights groups and countries such as Turkey, Brazil, Malaysia and Colombia demanding the activists' release. Deported to France the first time, Thunberg reaffirmed her commitment, declaring that climate activism and human rights are inseparable struggles rooted in global justice. The Guardian reports that Israel's interception of the Global Sumud Flotilla has sparked global outrage and street protests. Italy saw the largest mobilization, with an estimated 10,000 people in Rome and major unions calling a general strike to denounce the detention of Italian citizens. Demonstrations also erupted across Europe, Latin America and also Asia, while also Turkey, Ireland, Mexico, Brazil and Malaysia condemned the naval action as illegal. Colombia also escalated tensions by expelling Israel's remaining diplomats. The piece points out that Israel defended the operation as a necessary security measure in a combat zone, insisting aid could be delivered through official channels. The episode, the report concludes, has deepened Israel's diplomatic isolation while increasing solidarity movements worldwide. Israeli media covered the interception, with many reporting the Israeli claims that documents from Gaza show Hamas's direct involvement with the aid flotilla, as Israel claims. The Times of Israel reports that Israeli authorities have released documents that have been retrieved from Gaza, alleging direct ties between Hamas and the Global Sumud Flotilla. Now, the documents include a 2021 letter from Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh, instructing the Palestinian Conference for Palestinians Abroad to coordinate the flotilla, and also a roster of PCPA operatives, several of whom are senior Hamas figures, as the piece also reports. Now, Israel claims that PCPA designated Hamas, it is, as Israel claims, a designated Hamas front abroad, owns dozens of the flotilla's vessels via shell companies. The article frames the claims as evidence that the flotilla is not a purely humanitarian mission, but part of Hamas's operations, as Israel claims. Israeli media also reported on the unprecedented U.S. security guarantees to Qatar that President Donald Trump pledged by signing an executive order to that effect. The order mandates treating any attack on the Gulf Emirates' sovereignty or independence or even infrastructure as an assault on America itself. Now, this commitment framed to include potential military action comes weeks after an Israeli strike on Hamas-linked sites inside Qatar, which spurred Doha's demand for stronger U.S. backing. The report also underscores Qatar's strategic value as host to major U.S. air and naval bases, as the pact, according to the report, is the strongest defense guarantee Washington has ever granted to a non-NATO state. The report goes on to say that Qatar has long sought assurances against regional threats while balancing ties with neighbors. The piece concludes the agreement signals a dramatic U.S. shift in Gulf security policy. American media continue to focus on the U.S. government shutdown, with some further analyzing the impact of the shutdown, while others blamed Democrats for the governmental halt. Mark A. Thiessen wrote in the Washington Post arguing that Democrats triggered this government shutdown not to defend Obamacare, but to preserve temporary subsidies from Biden's American Rescue Plan. The author stresses that these tax credits, initially framed as pandemic relief, were set to expire in 2023 and then extended to 2026. But he says Democrats now want to make them permanent. Thiessen blames Biden's $1.9 trillion package for fueling historic inflation and dismisses Democratic claims that Republicans are undermining health care. The article frames the shutdown as a politically unsustainable gamble. For Thiessen, Trump should resist concessions, portraying the standoff as Democrats clinging to Bidenomics and rather than genuine health reform. Foreign Policy, in its analysis, examines how the latest U.S. government shutdown reverberates beyond domestic politics into national security and diplomacy. While military operations continue, nearly half of the Pentagon's civilian staff and more than a third of State Department employees face furloughs, disrupting intelligence gathering, military exercises, and diplomatic planning. The piece quotes analysts who warn adversaries such as China and also Russia will use the shutdown to highlight U.S. dysfunction, undermining its image as a reliable partner. Former officials stress morale concerns as unpaid staff may disengage or even leave the workforce, raising long-term security risks. Foreign allies also face uncertainty with cancelled visits and delayed coordination. The piece concludes that the shutdown fuels both strategic vulnerabilities and damaging perceptions abroad. The New York Times explored President Trump's controversial call to deploy U.S. troops in American cities, framing urban crime as a war from within. The analysis highlights Trump's remarks delivered at Marine Corps Base Quantico, signaling a break with America's long tradition of non-partisan military designed to face external and not domestic threats. The piece traces this tension back to the Founding Fathers' fears of tyranny and recounts past efforts by military leaders and Congress to resist politicizing the armed forces. Today, however, Trump's allies in the Pentagon and Republican-controlled Congress have largely endorsed his vision, raising alarms among historians and veterans. The piece warns that politicizing the military for partisan aims risks eroding its credibility, professionalism as well, and constitutional role. And we'll end with this obituary that was published by The Telegraph that pays tribute to Dame Jane Goodall, who passed away at 91 after transforming the study of chimpanzees and redefining humanity's place in nature. Beginning her research in the 1960s, Goodall revealed groundbreaking discoveries. Chimpanzees use tools, eat meat, and display both empathy and also aggression, traits once thought uniquely human. Despite criticism for giving names to her subjects, her pioneering observational methods became the standard in primatology. Beyond science, Goodall became a global voice for conservation and animal welfare, founding organizations and writing influential books. Her legacy extends from the forests to international platforms, advocating environmental and humanitarian causes, making her one of the most influential scientists of the 20th and the 21st centuries. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.